Yes, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'll just quickly do the introduction and then I'll hand over to the VC. I'll start with Prof. Yukoda, our DVC, Deputy Vice-Chancellor. Our second, well, not second, but our other Deputy Vice-Chancellor, Prof. Hetty Pakeng. And then next to Prof. Pakeng is the VC, Dr. Max Price. And then next to Dr. Price is our Deputy Vice-Chancellor, Prof. Daya Reddy. So I'll hand over without any waste of time to Dr. Max Price.
Okay. Just for the press to have it accurate, Professor Reddy and Professor Korda are acting Deputy Vice-Chancellors. Welcome and thank you for coming to this press conference. We've called it because there's been disruption on our campus this morning and in fact last night, and we wanted to update the media and our communities about what's been happening. There's been a group of about 200 students, protesters. We in fact know that some of them are from off the campus, so some are not our students, who have been from early in the morning barricading some roads. There was an attempt to stop our shuttles running by slashing the tires of 6 jammy shuttles. I should say that the person who did that has been arrested and is currently in the police station. There have also been at least 2 other people arrested thus far for the protests. The protests also moved to the campus where some excrement was thrown in certain buildings, which of course is very disruptive to the lectures, but those have largely been cleared up already. Libraries were intermittently closed but are open again. So in spite of this disruption by a small group, the campus is open and functioning. We have had the help of the SAPs, the public order policing and private security, and this has been necessary in response to these unlawful forms of action which we utterly condemn. There is no excuse for, it is fine to protest and to make a point. There is no excuse for preventing other people from being able to study, to write their tests and exams, and to be in the library. There have also been disruptions in the residences where the catering services have been interfered with, and so those students have been issued with food vouchers so that they can eat, that they can get meals off campus. The protest is utterly unacceptable at this time of the year, particularly since we have made all reasonable attempts, we believe, to negotiate, to meet students, to understand what the legitimate demands might be. And I need to say that the executive was working until after midnight last night in negotiations again to try to avoid disruption. But frankly, the demands that are currently being placed, given to us, which just expand with each meeting, do not seem to us to be reasonable or that we can meet them. Some we can't meet because they are completely beyond our control. The main one is that there should be a 0% fee increase, and that is the university would go bankrupt if we did not have an income that increased at least with inflation. Fees constitutes about half of the income that the university receives, and so the consequence of having no fee increase would be devastating. We are still in discussions with government as we were last year. This is the university sector as a whole, discussions with the ministry to see whether the Ministry of Higher Education or the Treasury or anyone else is willing to cover part of that increase. But that is not yet, we have not yet had any answers on that. And in the meantime, the universities have to plan for next year's budget. So that is not a demand that we can meet. What we can do, though, is we can ensure that through increasing our financial aid, that students who are on financial aid do not get excluded, that they are not financially compromised as a result of a fee increase. And UCT, fortunately, is able, through raising donor money and through our own budgets, to provide a financial aid system which will ensure that those students on NSFAS and in the missing middle are not compromised, disadvantaged by a fee increase. In fact, in real terms, the students next year would be paying the same amount as they paid in 2015. In other words, over a 3-year period, when inflation might have moved by 20%, means the real cost of that education has dropped by 20%. So we can't do more than that. The other demand, of course, is that the President releases the report of the Fees Commission. We have supported that demand. Unfortunately, it's not in our control. So in our view, it is quite unacceptable to behave in this way over demands that are actually unreasonable. I'm going to offer my colleagues some opportunities to say what the consequences and the risks are if we do not continue. We have continued, and we have continued with, where necessary, online learning, although we're back in classes today. But if disruptions continue in ways that make the classes too stressful for students and staff, then we have backup plans to do online learning so that the exams will happen on the due date in November and that we will complete the academic year. I'm going to invite Professor Reddy to say something about the importance of finishing the academic year and the exams.
Yes, thanks very much, Vice-Chancellor. So you may recall that, you may know that as it is, given the events of last year, we've had to shift our academic year by something like a month. We'll only be concluding just before Christmas. There is absolutely no room for maneuver, such as spilling over into the new year. The consequences for our students are absolutely dire if we were not able to complete the academic year, if they were not able to write their exams and to graduate. It would mean that those students who are due to graduate would not be able to take up their positions, take up jobs. Other students would not be able to progress through to the next year and potentially would have their academic studies extended by a year or so at considerable cost to themselves, to their families. There is a resolve amongst the executive, the academic community, the academic staff, and the absolute vast majority of students that we must complete the academic year. And as Vice-Chancellor has indicated, if need be, we have one more week of lectures to go. Our lecturers would move to online learning or blended learning, as they have already done during the last week, if necessary. With regard to the examinations, those are on track. Class tests as well being written during this week and next. The plan is that those will continue. We have plans in place to ensure that they take place without incident, so that the exams will all be written on the dates on which they are scheduled to be written, and we'll complete the academic year on time.
Thank you. One of the areas that presents a particular risk when you have this sort of protest is our research activities, and I'm going to ask the Deputy Vice-Chancellor for Research to comment on the precautions we take there and how we manage that.
I think for us, when there's a protest on campus and there's a shutdown, so that's the reason why we get concerned when students invade buildings where we have laboratories all over campus, in the Faculty of Health Sciences, in the Faculty of Engineering, the Built Environments, the Faculty of Science. We need to protect that equipment, not just only for their future use, but for their safety at the moment, because they can hurt themselves.
Thank you. I think we'll open to questions if you have any. I see some journalists came in afterwards, and for those who've come in late, we can repeat for you afterwards.
James News 24. I've just got a few questions. The first one is, at a meeting, I think it was last week, Monday, the SOC at the time discussed that there's a 10% fee increase proposed at the university. I just want to check, is that currently what the university is proposing, or what is the current proposal on the table? Secondly, there was a mention of huge bonuses given to the senior staff in the university. Just want the university to respond to those allegations. And then finally, just the cost of private security within the university. I know the university employed a private security company after some disruptions earlier. Sorry, my timeline's off, but so if you can just confirm the amount of money being spent by the university on private security at the moment. Thank you.
The first question was on proposed fee increases. Look, we are trying to, we believe we need to increase the fees comparable to the rate of inflation in the higher education sector. And the higher education sector, across the sector, has assessed that what they call the higher education price index is around 8%. And so our proposal, which has not been approved, it's meant to be dealt with in discussion with students, and that's been delayed because of the presidential report. But our proposal will be that we increase the tuition fees by 8%, in the region of 8%, and the catered residence fees by 10%. And there are reasons why the cost increases are different in those two. Once again, I want to emphasize that students on financial aid and missing middle students would be protected from those increases through the greater allocation to financial aid for them. Your second question, cost of security. Yes, we were asked what that costs, and we gave the figure. This is security over 2 years, 24 months. It's sporadic, of course. For most of 2017, we've had no security on campus and haven't needed any. We've had a peaceful year up until a few days ago. But we needed a lot of security for about 8 weeks in 2016 and also late 2015. And in aggregate, we've spent about 24 million on the main private security company that we were using. This, of course, is not something we budget for in advance. We don't expect this. This is non-recurrent. It's once-off, so it's not money that can be simply used for something else that has a recurrent requirement, such as financial aid. And in fact, the insurance covers a significant part of the private security, because the insurance wants to make sure that buildings don't get vandalized and they don't have other costs downstream. So the insurance assists in a significant portion of that cost. The third question was about bonuses. The bonuses that you're referring to, which were published in our financial statements, relate to performance of of the whole university from July 2015 to June 2016. So this is from more than a year and a half ago, because the financial statements get published a bit later. The bonuses for the whole university, depending on exactly what you include as a bonus, but if you also include promotions as a reward for bonuses, was upwards of 48 million rand. The bonuses that were paid to the executive team, which is the deans, the deputy vice-chancellors, the vice-chancellor, the registrar, what we call the executive directors, the heads of the functional units, was 2.8 million rand. So in the scheme of bonuses and what savings could be made, that needs to be borne in perspective, 2.8 against upwards of 40 million. The Remuneration Committee makes the decisions, which is a council committee with external members. The Remuneration Committee did not think it was appropriate to penalise all employees by denying all employees bonuses for work that had been done between 2015 and 2016 on the expectation that there would be bonuses, and then in 2017, during the financial pressures, to then cancel those bonuses. They also did not think it was appropriate to cancel the bonuses exclusively of the executive members, who had, like other members, had gone the extra mile during that period. So, but having said all of that, the issue has raised the question of should we continue with bonuses, and that issue will be bonuses in general, and that's on our agenda of the Remuneration Committee to ask if that is still appropriate.
Good morning.
Morning.
I just need two things, please. The confirmation on arrest. If I understand correctly, it's 3 students who were arrested, And then my last question is, what is the university doing in ensuring that SAPs use minimal force on unarmed students? Earlier this morning, a naked female student was dragged into a SAP's van.
So I can't be sure that it's 3 students that have been arrested. I'm only told that it's 3 people. Don't yet know whether they're all students. My understanding of the incident that you are referring to is that there was a human barricade, and that a woman, who I think is a student, lay down naked across the road where the buses and traffic are supposed to travel. They were given warnings. She was given 10 minutes to move. This was clearly a form of protest, and she refused to move, and the police attempted to arrest her. And so I don't know, when you describe it as dragging across the road, I haven't seen the visuals, but there are a lot of people around with a lot of visuals. So I'm sure that if you ask what are the measures that are there to ensure police do not use excessive force, I think it's the fact that this is all in the public eye, and that the police know that there is a visual record of everything they do, and that they will be held accountable through the court system. But it should be clear as well that the police are in charge of their operations, not the university.
Morning, Craig Lee Smith, Eyewitness News. I just wanted to find out, do you have percentages of the students that was part of the NSFAS and the middle income with regards to the margin of the percentages? I just need that, if you have that. Thank you.
Shai, do you want to come up and tell us some numbers? What's it? What? So in 2017, right, this will be approximate. There are approximately 17,000 undergraduate students at UCT. 4,500, which is just over 25%, are receive financial aid directly from the university. There will be many others that receive financial aid from corporates, from government agencies, etc., but that doesn't come through us, so we don't know about them. Of the 4,500, which is, as I said, 30%, 3,400 are on financial aid, the NSFAS financial aid, with a top-up from the university, because the NSFAS financial aid doesn't cover the full cost of study. We allocate almost the same amount again to cover, and 1,100 are missing middle students. So you can work out the percentages from that. Yeah.
Thank you. I still teach as a law professor, and because I'm only acting in this position as Deputy Vice-Chancellor, but I also, in my portfolio, have the Human Resources Department, which includes relationships with all the trade unions across the university, representing approximately 5,000 staff. What has been apparent since the beginning of the year, and has really impacted on employee relations in the university, is the effect of the events of last year and the year before on staff morale and the stress which staff and students throughout the university are experiencing. I walked around campus, upper campus this morning, after the protesting group had moved off upper campus, and I saw some of the effects of what they'd done. But what struck me particularly was in standing outside the main library while waiting for it to open, and the endless stream of students who came up to the bottom of the stairs and looked and saw that the library was closed until further notice, and I looked at the expression on their faces. By definition, education is the key to advancement in all sorts of different ways. Massive numbers of people throughout this country have a stake in what is happening in higher education generally and at UCT in particular, but the families and the friends of the students and the staff, and the effect of the kind of unlawful action that we saw being perpetrated throughout the campus, upper campus this morning, and sometimes on the lower campus, is devastating once again, especially as we're within 2 weeks of the final examinations. So I think that that really needs to be understood by the wider public. Thank you.
Hi. Hi, Mr. Price. Marvin Charles from the Cape Argus here. I just want to find out, Mr. Price, with the growing tension on the university, what are you going to do next? What is the university's plan going forward exactly? And I just want to find out, what do you have to say to some of the students that actually want to complete the academic year?
Yeah, I think that you came in late, didn't you?
Yeah, I did.
I'm afraid I covered all of that. So what I'd rather do is say to those who have completed and want to go, let's call that part of the question to end, and then a whole lot have come in later, and then we'll repeat it. And I'll say it again for the others. Yeah? You got a microphone? Who's got the mic?
Charita Casson, Varsity Newspaper. One of the demands from the students centers around mental health, specifically looking at the suicides of predominantly black students. I wanted to know what the university's current policy is on mental health and how they will be ameliorating the problems that the students have highlighted. Thank you.
Thanks. That's a really important issue. This is not a new issue, of course. The mental health issues have been raised a year ago, and a year ago we set up a mental health task team. The mental health task team reviewed all of our policies and advised that we should increase services, both preventive and curative or responsive. We've done that in the following ways. We have 2 psychiatric nurses on every night for emergency call to any residents if a student has a crisis. We now pay for a 24/7 hotline to SADC, the South African Depression and Anxiety Group, so that students can call free the line anytime they need some support. We've employed 4 extra psychologists in the student wellness service, and the waiting list, which was previously in weeks, has now down to a day or 2. We've also changed the system so that there is an immediate assessment and a triage if someone arrives even without an appointment, so they can be assessed. So in terms of dealing with the crises after they happen, I think we've done a lot, and we can no doubt do more, but we've certainly been extremely sensitive to the issue. Preventatively, we're trying to destigmatize mental disorder and mental illness, because it's important that people should come forward when they need help rather than when they're in a crisis. And there are educational campaigns being run across the campus to do that. On the question of suicides themselves, although one suicide is one too many, and it's a terrible thing to happen, there is a sense created when you live in a community like a campus, because you know about the suicides that happen. The frequency seems to be very high. But we've looked at the frequency of suicides in South Africa in the age group of 18 to 24, and in the country in general, the suicide rate is significantly higher than the suicide rate amongst our students on campus, thank goodness. And that's not to say that those stresses aren't important and critical, and that's why we provide the services, but it does suggest that some of the services that we have in place are actually helping to address the problem. But as I say, it's a tragedy whenever a student dies, and it affects not only that student's family, but if it happens in a residence, all of the people in the residence, their friends and colleagues. And so I think it is one of the most important issues that we can deal with and have to deal with. But I do think that we want to be seen to be taking it seriously, because we are. One of the difficulties is that it only becomes a suicide when the police inquest has happened. So when someone dies, they could have died of an overdose. They could have died of some substance abuse. Let's say someone dies alone in their room, for example. And we are not allowed to presume whether it's a suicide or not until the police have done the toxicology reports, and unfortunately that takes a long time, and the magistrate has confirmed it. So what I can say is that 5 students, as far as I know, have died, and we don't know how many of them are suicides. They could all be suicides. That was on campus, so of course we don't know off campus.
I know you've said this in your briefing already, but I just want to make sure that we understand this. So you say that there's huge, devastating consequences to disruptions to the academic year. You said there's a week left, but I still don't hear any concrete plan by the university to address the concerns of students and make sure that academic activity actually continues. And I just want to understand, as an executive management team, what will you be doing in the weeks ahead to ensure that academic activity continues, and also to address the concerns of the students?
Right. Well, firstly, we remain open to talking with anyone, really. We never close the door to talking. If the students come back and say, we think this is a compromise or a way forward, we're open to that. And as I said, we were doing that until after midnight last night. But in order so that's to try to address the issues. We do want to talk about fees. The students have up to now withheld any discussion about fees because they say they want the presidential report to be out. But if they come back to us and say, we'd like to talk about the fee increase and we'd like to talk about how to protect poor students, we are open and available and willing to do that. In fact, there is a new SRC that was elected and took office yesterday on the 1st of November, and we will be immediately, as soon as they've elected their leadership, we will be immediately engaging with that SRC on this. On the question of how we're going to make sure that the academic program continues, well, as long as there's any threat of disruption, we will have both private security to protect those high-risk buildings, to protect exams and tests, and to protect, wherever we can, libraries and computer laboratories so that learning can continue. And we rely on the POPs, the Public Order Policing, and the SAPs to implement an interdict that we obtained on Monday this week. The interdict prevents people from disrupting classes, obstructing access, interfering with residences. POPs and SAPs do not actually have the resources to police that effectively and across the campus. We have a large campus, probably nearly 100 buildings, and these disruptions can happen in any of them. People set off fire alarms, and they can do so very discreetly, and then everyone has to evacuate the building. So those are extremely difficult things to police. But where we can, we will be using whatever police resources and private security resources are needed to keep the academic program open. But having said all that, our final option is, if we feel that the tensions being created for students and staff and the impact on morale outweighs the benefit of being in class, then we switch over to blended learning and other forms of learning. In other words, lecturers might distribute their lecture notes. Almost all of our lectures get recorded, by the way, anyway, and so you can use a lecture that's been recorded in a previous year. If it's on the same topic, it's already done. Or lecturers will specifically record a lecture and put it onto our website so that students can download it. There are some virtual chat rooms. And the laboratory work we will protect, because the laboratory work is in those high-risk buildings that were mentioned. So those buildings are specifically secured. There will be interruptions if we can't control it. We pause during the interruption. We ask students to stand aside and be calm. We clean up and we continue. We have to get the message across that we will finish the academic year and we will write the exams. I hope that answers your question of how we plan to do that.
I just want to say something about the interdict, because the interdict has been controversial. We only obtained the interdict on Monday. It was granted by the Deputy Judge President of the Cape after hearing the students. Very often interdicts are granted without hearing the other party if there is a clear and present danger of unlawful activity. The interdict does not in any manner affect the right to protest. But every right in our Constitution and our Bill of Rights has limits. And the limits on the right to protest is that one has to do it peacefully and unarmed. And it's only when those limits are exceeded that protest becomes unlawful and is therefore able to be, will be affected by the interdict. This university has been extraordinarily tolerant of pretty disruptive protest for some time. And it's only when the boundaries of lawfulness are exceeded that we have to rely on private security and the policing services to keep some form of order and to allow the vast majority of staff and students to go about the business which they're entitled to by right as well. Thank you.
I called the press conference because since last night there have been disruptions on campus again. There were some last week, and we shifted learning from classroom learning to blended learning. But when we resumed, the disruptions have occurred again last night and today. As far as I can tell, there are about 200 protesters. It's clear to us that not all of them are UCT students. And they started by vandalizing some shuttle buses. 6 buses had their tires slashed. Fortunately, we were able to arrest the culprit, who is a student, and that person is now in the local police station cell. There were barricades on some of the roads, and some people have been arrested as a result of those barricades. Some protesters, either during the night or in the morning, threw excrement, human excrement, in some of the lecture buildings, not in the lecture theatres, but that of course disrupts and had to delay lectures in certain places. But we've also cleaned those up now. The buses are running again. We have had tests and exams today. They have been protected and have run, as far as we know, without incident. I think this behaviour is completely unacceptable. We condemn it. It's unlawful. It's violent. But most importantly, it prevents other students, the 99%, who wish to study, who wish to prepare for their exams and write their exams, from fulfilling their dreams. And really, this is unacceptable also because it has no link to achievable goals. For example, the one goal is that we should have a 0% increase of fees. The university will face inflationary increases in costs next year. The government has not agreed or given any indication that it will increase our budget to compensate for fees. And so this is not something we can do to give a 0% increase. What we can do is to increase financial aid for those who are in the financial aid category, so that they will not be excluded, that they will not face an increase in fees. That's only a part of the student body. So we can protect the poor and the missing middle as well from increases, but we cannot commit to a 0% increase. Another demand that they've made is around mental health services. These are services that have been improved dramatically over the last while, and of course we're willing to sit and discuss how they can be improved further. But this is not something that we can tolerate a shutdown of the university for. So these demands are not new. I believe we've been working on them for the last year, and most of them have been successfully fulfilled. Accommodation, for example, we've hired accommodation from private residences in order to ensure that we can increase the capacity and that students are not sleeping rough. And as far as we know, there are no students who don't have accommodation that are deserving, certainly not on financial aid. We remain open to engage anytime because that's obviously the better option. We don't want people to leave with criminal records. We did obtain an interdict to prevent the disruption of academic activities, and that means that any student who does disrupt the activities puts themselves at risk of being in contempt of court and of having a criminal record. We really don't want students to do that, and I appeal to them, particularly those students who are genuinely committed to the causes that they have, to distance themselves from this violent activity, and to declare that they will have nothing to do with it and call on other students to desist from that. Well, the first measures are preventive measures, so we're able to engage and willing to engage. Even when there's a barricade, we send an executive member down to talk to the people and say, what's the issue here? And usually they just say, we want to shut down the university. So there's preventive measures. Then we have got the interdict, which is an important legal measure. We have working closely with SAPS and POPs, the Public Order Policing, and we have additional private security. Private security is there to protect the most high-risk areas, such as laboratories and buildings that have hazardous materials. We have buildings that have viruses in their laboratories, radioactive materials, explosive chemical materials. We had an incident last week where students got close into a laboratory where there's radioactive material. So that's why we need private security to protect those buildings. We also use private security to protect all of the exams and tests, the libraries, the computer laboratories, and wherever we can to stop disruption from buildings. But private security cannot really do crowd control. They can protect the buildings. The POPs and SAPs have to assist with removing human barricades and crowd control. Thank you. Yeah. So of course, we hope that lectures will continue because particularly for the weaker students, relying on online materials or distributed course notes without having the face-to-face contact with tutors and lecturers puts them at a greater disadvantage. So, but we do have that as a backup plan. If in the end the amount of toy-toying and disruption is such that students feel they can't study in that environment because of the noise, because of anxiety, because they get triggered by a repeat of people disrupting lectures. If they decide that it's not working, then our lecturers have been prepared throughout the year to switch over to what we call blended learning. It's up to the lecturer to decide what the best way is. Many will record their lectures. Some have got pre-recorded lectures from last year because almost all of our big lectures are recorded in any case. Some will distribute lecture notes. There will also be some virtual tutorials and obviously engagement with tutors by email. So we're determined to complete the curriculum over the next 8 days. We finish on the 10th of November, and then the exams begin on the 15th, and they will be protected and continue as planned. Well, just to say that, as far as we can tell, when we assess the crowds that are supporting the protests, there are about 200, up to 200 protesters in a campus community of about 27,000. So we're talking about less than 1% of the campus community. Now, they may have other supporters who are not protesting, but it's absolutely unacceptable for 1% to hold the rest of the campus to ransom. And that's why we're needing to protect the rest of the campus as well. Okay. Yes, yes, yes.
You stated that color at this time is critical but you also said that it is important for the presidency to also this management so long.
Yeah.
If it is, as the students said yesterday, the university, not just the UCT, but the university is doing this, with the students, wouldn't that push because they...
Okay, are you recording it or are you just making notes? Okay, so the students made this demand initially 2 weeks ago, or just under 2 weeks ago. I agreed 100% with it, and I immediately wrote a letter to the President, which he has acknowledged, and I issued a press statement calling on the President to release the report. 5 days later, the President answered that he would release the report, and that he'll release it in 1 week. So for me now to go and march to Parliament and say, no, release it today, doesn't seem reasonable. The President actually said he wants to share it with the ministers, and he wants to prepare a position. I think that the President has responded appropriately to our call, and that for that reason, it's just protesting for the sake of protesting to go for another march to Parliament. So that's the first reason I opposed it. The second is I didn't say that people shouldn't march. I said you're free to march, but I'm not closing the university in order to march, because there are 20,000 other students who want to study, who want to revise for exams, or who may have tests. And to force them to go to Parliament when they don't want to is to force one group's opinion on another. So they know where I stand, the President knows where I stand, the public knows where I stand on this issue. No further purpose is served by closing the university to march on that. Well, I haven't seen it. Oh, well, my hope, did you say? Well, I suppose my hope is something close to what I submitted. I submitted a year and a half ago a commission submission, and that still is my view. I haven't seen anything yet to change it, but it's a personal view. And that is that higher education should be funded and should be free for people below a certain income. Let's call them the poor. That people above that income should be able to access what's called an income contingent loan, which means that at the time they study, it costs them nothing, and that there's no barriers because the government gives them money and pays it on their behalf to the university. But once they start earning, and only once they start earning, once they become taxpayers, so they're earning above a certain threshold, then they start paying the loan back. And the amount that they pay back is contingent, in other words, dependent on their income. So they would pay, let's just say it's 3% of income. So if you earn a little bit, you'll only be paying back a little bit. If you earn a lot, you'll pay back a lot. And it may happen that some people never pay back the loans because they don't earn enough. But it's not related actually to the size of the loan. It's related to your income. And so it's a fair way of doing it because the poor do not get over-penalized because they've got a big outstanding loan. The rich are required to pay back as much of it as possible in a shorter period. So I think income contingent loans are the fairest way. And then above a certain threshold, it seems to me there's no reason why the public should be subsidizing the education of those who are very wealthy. So if the Commission comes out with something along those lines, personally, I would be happy. But I think my mind is open. So if they come up with other proposals that make sense, I'm absolutely open to considering them. And I can imagine that there would be one or two other options.